Hi everyone, Jenny with On Fire Fit, and I am with my on fire baby, Thalia. This is my 16-year-old daughter, and she has a little something to share with you that she experienced the other day. And I hear from different people that they like to hear encouraging stories about how people hear from God or what it is that you do to kind of get into that state where you actually can start to tell if you're hearing from God. She had an experience and I would love for her to tell you about it.
So I typically in the mornings, whenever I get up, whenever I'm doing my makeup or doing my hair, getting ready, I like to listen to specifically Craig Groeschel because I really enjoy his preaching style, and I will listen to his sermons because they have it all on YouTube, so I'll like to listen to them, not really watch since I'm kind of doing other stuff, but I do that in the mornings, and then at night I tend to do my YouVersion like Bible reading plan sort of thing or whatever that's like typically generated on a specific subject. And so whenever I've tried to, at night I've tried before to when I'm trying to go to bed, because for me it helps me doing my YouVersion plan at night because it helps me just fall asleep easier. But whenever I'll sometimes try to meditate at night, and for me it's super hard because my brain starts, I try to clear my brain and try to stop thinking about all the different things that are going on. But I feel like by the end of the day, my brain has been everywhere, so it's so hard for me to be able to understand or be able to clear my brain completely and not be thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow or what happened today or whatever. And so, but the other morning, I went to bed at 1:30 in the morning, and then I got up at 5:30 in the morning, and I could not sleep, which is kind of unusual because, if I'm going to bed really late, then I typically sleep in really late, but I was wide awake, completely awake, and which is kind of weird for me because I typically am very groggy in the morning and want my coffee, but I was super wide awake, and went out and I started talking with my mom, and I was saying, how I just can't fall back to sleep, and I knew I wouldn't be able to, and so I almost say you or she, or since you're here, just say you. Yes. Since you were saying that sometimes when you're up, you're weirdly awake, or sometimes God's trying to talk to you. And so I went into my room, and I just and you had recommended just saying things that you were thankful for and stuff like that, and just so I did that, and then I just tried to just quiet my mind, not think of anything, and I was praying because I know for me that it's hard to know whether or not am I actually just making this stuff up? Am I actually am I thinking it's from God, but it's really from me, or whatever it is? And so I was praying that I would know that it was from God, there wouldn't be a doubt in my mind, because I feel like that's kind of where I often struggle or whatever. And so I was praying that I either hear something, or I would see something, or something that I would be able to know that it was specifically coming from Him. And so I was sitting there, and I was just really trying to get into just a blank mental state, and I was focusing on my breathing because that kind of helped me, because it's kind of doesn't really have to do with anything that's it's not making me think of the day, it's not thinking me of what's coming up, it's just kind of helping me focus in my thoughts on something super specific, but it's not going to end up allowing other thoughts get into my head. And I heard the words, and I saw a music note, and it said treble clef. And at first I was like, okay, whatever. And I just kept on hearing it over and over and over again. I was like, okay, this is clearly important. But I do not get the musical genes in my family. That is my brother. He can play, the guitar, trumpet, or whatever, and he knows all that stuff. But for me, I don't know anything with music. And so I was like, I know treble clef is a note or something, like with music. It's not even a note, but it's something with music, but didn't know what it was. So when I looked it up, I saw that it had said, let me make sure it was saying. So it was saying it was defined as being a clef that puts the G above middle C on the second line of the staff. And then it later goes on to say a clef symbol is placed on the staff to identify the pitch represented by its lines and spaces. So in the beginning, my immediate thing that I went to was that the G is over the C. And for me, that's a very literal kind of seeing that it was kind of saying God with the G over the C, which C, my last name with the C. So it ends up, I was like, oh, that's clearly God's over, not God is more important, God is over me, kind of all of that. But then I started really focusing in on how I was talking about how the clef symbol represents or identifies the pitch before the music starts. And so my immediate thought with this was before I go into stressful situations or whatever it may be, because the next day was recital for me and I was very stressed out about that. I was thinking about how to have that kind of pre-pitch tone, whatever you want to call it, of having peace and just taking that with you through it, because it doesn't matter what is going to come up next, with the music, it's going to have the same pitch or tone. And so that really struck me. And then I started praying and I was asking God, because I was thinking of, maybe I would look up Bible verses online, just be Bible verse about music or something like that and try to find something. But then I was like, no, maybe not. And so I was praying to God. I was asking maybe I can hear from you saying what type of Bible verse I should go to or chapter or something. And I I went and I thought of Colossians, and then I heard 3. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go look at that. But then my immediate thought is, well, there's not even a Colossians 3. Philemon, there's 1 chapter. So I was like, oh no, once you start getting to those books, I was like, uh-oh, I really hope there's actually Colossians 3. And there is a Colossians 3. And I started reading from it in the beginning. It says, since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. So, and that's the beginning part of it. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe I misinterpreted what God was trying to say to me then, with the whole pitch idea of talking about, stressful situations. And I was like, maybe he's trying to say, going into this world, we're supposed to have a mindset of more of the heavenly things to focusing in on the earthly things, because that's our purpose. We're not supposed to be living with and of and in this world. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's clearly what he was trying to mean. But then later it talks about, it says, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you are called to peace, and be thankful. And so then I was like, oh, okay, so it's applying to both. So it's not only one, it's applying to both. But then later it goes on in the chapter saying, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And so immediately I was like, that's the connection between the music note or I can't say music note, but the treble clef, which is a musical term, symbol, yeah, and singing hymns, praising God through music, it was just so connected. I knew immediately, that's not something I could have done. That's not something that, I don't know what a treble clef is. There's the Bible was let him praise his name in dancing and singing with harp or whatever. And it wasn't one of those obvious Bible verses that are specifically music. And so I knew that there's no, I mean, first of all, with the treble clef thing by itself, like there's no way I would know what that is and how that would apply. But then with the two being related, I knew for certain it was from God, because there's no other, there's no way.
Yeah.
And so, or as one of the Bible video things I was watching too is saying, coincidence is just God wanting you to rename anonymous or something like that, you know. And so, you know, it's not just a coincidence. And so it just was very encouraging to me, because I feel like I never really heard God speak to me in that way. And so by, like, I think with it being in the morning, I feel like I've heard from a lot of different preachers and other people where they talk about how being, like, I would say I'm a night person. So I always thought it's better for me to do this stuff at night, or not necessarily, like, that sounds like a checklist sort of thing, but like try to do that sort of thing and really focus in on it at night. But there's something about it being in the morning where it's before you get on your phones, before you start worrying about, I was going to say school, but work or whatever it is, you know, it kind of helps you. And it was very encouraging to me because, I was say my mom's, your friend, Pastor Jim, he was, I can talk about this, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
He had been praying about you, and he brought up, I was saying her, you.
It's good. We all get it, we know.
Yeah, praying about you, and God started talking about how, you know, there's a lot in store for me, and about how he's really encouraged by me and stuff like that. And this was before this happened, like it's like a couple months ago, and that in and of itself kind of encouraged me, because like I feel like and also he doesn't know who I am at all whatsoever. No. Like you haven't mentioned anything about me, like other than my name maybe, right. But like doesn't know like about my life, and I've never spoken to him before. And hearing that, and that he has, like, God has a plan and stuff like that, and like I already know that obviously, but it's so specific, and that God still works in that way, because you hear in the Bible where it's like, oh, and you know, fire came down from heaven and all this different stuff, and you're like, oh, that was that time. Like now he works differently, which he works through his word, but he still does work through us, and we can still he still speaks to us, because I feel like that especially too, where you know, is very, people heard, like actually heard God, but now, and so for me I was always like, well, you know, I don't know, like it's not really like that anymore, but it's still applicable today. And so it was just really interesting. Exciting.
It is exciting. And I think, you know, it's interesting too, just as she was talking about that with Pastor Jim. I have not met him yet, but social media has opened up this world to so many wonderful things. And, you know, the fact that he was speaking, he was praying for me, and God started to talk to him about her. And when I shared that with her, how much that lifts somebody up. And so I think when we have the willingness to hear God talk, and we listen to him about all different kinds of things, even him being open to hearing from God about somebody else, how encouraging that is for her, and it is for anybody, because we want to know that God actually is thinking about us specifically, and he is, and I mean, we know that and everything, but I just feel like it's such a neat way to share the gift that God's given you. And when you're able to really open yourself up and realize that God really does speak to you, and keep that open heart and mind. You know, sometimes I just journal the things that I think God is saying, because you know, we all kind of question, is that just me making it up or whatever? But when you journal it, and then sometimes like she got confirmation right away because she got Bible verses that just like right away everything kind of gelled and went together. Sometimes you don't get that, but then you find out later. So I would really encourage you to do that. And I love that this came about with my daughter who's 16, because I don't know who all is watching this video right now, but sometimes the older generation says thinks that the younger generation is hopeless or they're so lost. And it's just so encouraging to know that God is at work in the younger generation too, and that he has a good plan for each of us, and that we need to focus in on the younger generation as well, and really listen, because they have amazing things to say and we can learn. She encourages me with the stuff that she talks about. So I just think it's amazing. God is so awesome. I'm so blessed to have a baby girl like this. So I just thank you so much for being here with us, and thanks for listening. And I thank you, my little precious one, for being willing to share your story. So, all right, well, you know the lingo that I always leave you with: live your life on fire.